There is talk this week of the world's first trillionaire, and I would say he's probably at least the third. He won't like to hear that, but running some numbers from David and Solomon, those two guys probably had more than $1 trillion in today's money. David had enough money just in gold to give Solomon to build the temple $240 billion. Just gold, let alone silver and bronze and wood. And that was just the gift for the temple, let alone what David lived on. And then if you see how much money Solomon had, he inherited that, plus he was bringing in billions of dollars of revenue every year, let alone what the merchants were bringing in, it says. And so in reading about David and Solomon, those guys were probably trillionaires before Elon Musk. And yet, when you have a choice for who you're going to give your money to at the end of life, would you want to give your money to a son or daughter who is known for drug dealing? You're like, if I give my money to my son or daughter, you know what's going to happen? They're going to live like prodigal son type living. Money is a magnifier, and Solomon says a lot about money, and money magnifies wisdom or folly. It doesn't change wisdom and folly, it just magnifies what's already there. It magnifies character. And so if you give someone who has wisdom $1 million, you're going to see how a wise person handles $1 million. If you hand a fool $1 million, well, you can read about the prodigal son. He's going to waste it with riotous living and blow it, we would say, and then come back to dad having blown probably millions of dollars in that story over a couple years and end with nothing. Money is a magnifier of foolishness and wisdom. And so for us, as we look at Proverbs, there's a lot that Proverbs says about money. And we have already seen in Proverbs 6 that debt is foolish. And so our first, but we all need money, right? There's not one person here that can say, I'm going to live without any money. You're like, well, not on this planet, right? On this planet, you need money, okay? And most of us want more money. And we ask somebody, how much money do you need? And the answer is always, oh, just a little more. Just a little more, just a little. If we just had a little more. And then you get that little more, and you're like, well, if I just had a little more, then we could do a little more. And then we're never satisfied, right, with money. And there are very few tools that God gives us to use on this planet that are more powerful or more seductive than money. And many Christians have questions about mistakes they have made with money, and hopefully you're asking questions about how to handle money when you're in your teens and 20s instead of when you're facing foreclosure and you're in your 50s or 60s or 70s and you're thinking, what did I do? And you can't go back to when you're in your teens and 20s to change. So learn when you're young, and Proverbs is written to the young, the naive, those who would listen, those who would learn how to avoid a lot of foolish mistakes. And when it comes to money, there's a lot of mistakes that we make as people that we wish we would have learned from our parents, grandparents, others that were wise with money. So we're going to start today with what you saw here. Wisdom helps us to avoid money mistakes. Okay, I don't have on the screen the text of Scripture, so you're going to have to follow along. And we're in Proverbs 11, where our Scripture reading was. We'll come back to there. So what we'll do, we'll try to go through in order the verses, and then the next point, we'll go through the verses as well. So 11:15 is where we're at. For our first, the wise do not rely on debt. Wise wealth does not rely on debt. Now, I understand there are a couple of times where debt may be wise, like for a house or possibly a business. But other than those two things go up in value, which makes them not as as foolish. And so, other than that, though, and many people will say it is really wise to have a car payment. Okay, you can run the numbers on a car payment. The average car today, the new car, costs between $40,000 and $50,000. If you get a car loan on a $40,000 car, that car is going to go down in value. Okay, all of us know that. Anything with an engine goes down in value. Okay, and so if you take $40,000 and you have to finance that, you're going to end up paying close to $50,000 to $53,000, depending on your interest rate, for the same car. Okay, so you're paying $53,000 for a $40,000 car if you finance it. Now, if you save money, like make yourself a car payment and drive something that isn't your first choice of car or second choice, or maybe it was given to you, okay? You can say, if I can get 3 or 4 or 5 years out of this car, and I'll make myself a car payment, and I put that money in the bank, even at 3% interest, you can pay $38,000 because of interest that will be coming toward you from the bank over 3 or 4 years, and you'll have enough money for a $40,000 car. So would you rather pay $38,000 or $53,000? Same car. It's the timing of when you get it. And it's the timing of whether you use debt or whether you save and pay cash. Now, most people do not think that way. They don't think, I got to get a new car, and so when you go to the dealer, their number one question the dealer asks you is what? How much can you afford? And that's not how much do you have to pay. It's how much can you afford per month. Okay, and you can keep doing that. Or you can say, I'm going to take that $15,000 that I saved, I'm going to put it in something that goes up in value instead of a car that goes down in value. So you can see just with a simple illustration like that. I think your kids, as they get to be 16, 17, 18, they need to sit down with you, mom and dad, and think through that kind of scenario with just a simple car payment, okay? Is it wrong to have a car payment? No, many of you probably have a car payment. You're like, oh, I hope he doesn't. But I'm going to tell you that the wise in Proverbs don't rely on debt. That's not how you build wealth, okay? That's why banks are naming stadiums. And you look at the banks and the type of buildings that are in major cities are named for banks. That's because the banks are making a lot of money on you and on me whenever we rely on debt instead of saving and living on less than we earn. So wisdom does not rely on debt. Proverbs 11:15, we read it. Let's look at it again. Whoever puts up security for a stranger will surely suffer harm. But he who strikes hands in pledge who hates striking hands in pledge is secure. Today we would say this is co-signing. What is someone who needs to be co-signed with or for is because the bank doesn't trust them. They don't either have credit enough or their credit is so low that their interest rate is so high that they can't get a loan that they want for something. And so if the bank doesn't trust them, and I would say that's wisdom on the bank's part for the most part, that the relative says to you, can you come co-sign for me? And what's going to happen, though, if they default on their payments? Who's the bank going to come after? They're going to come after you. Okay, so you can see the wisdom in not co-signing for someone who is irresponsible with money. And so it says here that wisdom will teach us that you will suffer harm if you put up security for a stranger. And it says that in Proverbs 6 as well, and he who hates striking hands in a pledge is secure. All right, then chapter 22. So over a couple pages to chapter 22, and we'll look at a few verses. We'll look at 3 verses in chapter 22, and verses 7, 26, and 27. So Proverbs 22, verse 7. If you love being in debt. You probably don't know this verse. Proverbs 22:7. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender. Financial gurus say if you give money to a relative, Thanksgiving tastes different. Because you're going to see that relative, and that relative's going to be reminding you, you owe me money. And you can't take a vacation, you can't take your family out for ice cream without that relative saying, but you're behind on your payments. Why are you going on vacation? Why are you doing splurging? Why are you getting a new car whenever you're still in debt with me, right? And so, and even the nicest person that you could be in debt to is still going to be, you're going to feel like you're in slavery to them. And it's supposed to be like that. God has designed it like that so that we will not want to be in slavery. Now, some people go into slavery because they can't pay debts. We have a story that Jesus told about a man who couldn't pay his debts, and he was cast into prison, and then he found somebody, and he's talking about forgiveness there. But in the Old Testament, and it looks like in the New Testament with Jesus' story, that if you could not pay your debts and you kept getting into deeper and deeper debt, that you would eventually have to sell yourself and possibly your family into slavery. So debt can lead to literal slavery, but there's not slavery going on today in our country, but you will see a lot of people in debt. You can Google it to see what the percentage of people that have debt and what the type of debt that they have. And if you're in debt to a credit card company today, what is the credit card charging you for interest? It is awful. If you think that's a good deal, I will gladly loan you some money and let you pay me 30% interest. It's awful. And you would say, if I did that to you, I would be really mean, right? But you do it with a credit card. And it's easy to buy stuff on credit. But the wise don't rely on debt. You have to avoid money mistakes. Also in chapter 22, next page over, verses 26 and 27, be not one of those who gives pledges, who puts up security for debts. If you have nothing with which to pay, why should your bed be taken from under you? All right, this is similar to 11:15, that debt is foolish. He says, don't go into debt. Don't, because they could come and take your bed from under you. Okay, and we all probably know someone that lost a car, repossession, lost a house, foreclosure. This is what happens whenever we become slaves of other people. Now, what's the solution often to debt? The last two discipline, and hard work. Those two things have to work for you as an adult. You have to discipline yourself to say, no, we can't afford that. And there is always, Elon Musk tells his family, we can't afford that. You say, no, he's a trillionaire. Everybody tells their family, we can't afford that. I don't care if you're a billionaire or you're like one of us, right? Everybody has limits. The wealthy know where their limits are and they stay below them. And they don't overspend. They don't rely on debt to have nice things before you can really afford nice things. So just wait and save. And we can get some interest on the savings, like I said with the car illustration. Wisdom doesn't rely on debt. You can see that in Proverbs 6, 1-5, and these 4 verses. Also, wisdom, if we go back to chapter 13, we'll see wisdom doesn't rely on haste. If there is a get-rich-quick scheme, now we have the internet, now there's all kinds of things that, hey, invest in this, invest in crypto, and invest in all these things, and if you don't understand it, don't do it. I invested in something younger, I didn't understand, and I lost a lot of money. Like, I didn't understand this, and my dad and my great uncle, who was really good with money, were concerned about it, and I should have listened to their warnings, and I didn't. I was in my 20s, foolish, okay? Relying on haste often leads to, well, let's see what it leads to here in 13, and there's several verses here. 13:11. Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, it won't be secure, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. This is pretty simple. There's not a lot of explanation that's needed in these verses. You just need to know, see the wisdom and see the folly that's compared in these verses. If you're trying to get rich quick, you got a neighbor, you've got a friend, you've got a coworker, you've got a relative that tries to get you into some sort of scheme of how you're going to make a lot of money in a little bit of time or a little effort, you say, I don't know. Something's not right. Always bounce it off your spouse. If your spouse is like, it doesn't sound right, then go with that. And then Proverbs 13:11 says, wealth gained hastily usually dwindles. Okay, but whoever gathers little by little, you keep saving up. And your kids need to know, if you start saving with compound interest, and right now you put money away and a little bit, and over the course of 40 to 50 years, you let that compound interest earn you more and more money in like mutual funds and other things, you will find that you will have plenty of money to retire on. But you can't start saving when you're 60. Okay, you got to start saving when you're in your 20s and 30s and give that time to work. But that's the principle here. Don't worry about hasty. Invest into this and you're going to get real big returns really fast. Doesn't often work. But if you gather little by little, most millionaires today, this is how they got wealthy. They gathered little by little. They paid off their house and they put money in their retirement, and that's simple. And they understood, and their financial advisor explained what they were investing in, and they understood it. And so don't rely on haste. It is usually, and so when someone puts pressure on you, buy this right now. I'll give you a deal if you sign today. Usually salesmen work this way, right? They don't want you to leave the dealership. They don't want you to leave. Maybe they're on your front porch trying to sell you something for your house, and they got to get a sale right away, and you don't have time to talk to your spouse. The answer is always no. No. And if you can't wait a day, like you got to buy that car today because the deal's not going to be here tomorrow. Like if it's the bigger the purchase, the more you need to think about it. Pray about it, get some advice, get some wisdom, and if you have a spouse, if you have parents, somebody godly, and in a church, you may not have anybody in your family that's good with money, but there are people here that if you have money issues, there are several men that I've told, if something happens to me, these are the guys you're going to talk to about how to handle what happens to life and money if something happens to me, okay? And if I have questions, I go to several people, including my father-in-law and my dad. But if you don't have that in your life, that's where the church can come and help. And any advice that we would give to you is very confidential. And you obviously don't want to talk to someone who has loose lips like we saw, was it last week? Okay, so wisdom doesn't rely on haste. Chapter 20, we got to keep moving. Chapter 20, verse 21. An inheritance, I still have pages. All right, Proverbs 20, 21. An inheritance gained hastily in the beginning. An inheritance gained hastily in the beginning will not be blessed in the end. It's not a secure thing. If you get a lot of money, and we have it set up with our will that if something happens to my wife and I, that our kids don't get all this money when they're 16, 17, 18 years old. Okay? It goes to someone else, and as they get wisdom, then they get the inheritance. Okay? And we've all seen it. We've all seen people get money, and it just magnifies their foolish or wisdom. And you give someone who's very young, who's foolish and naive maybe, or a fool or a scoffer, you give them a lot of money, and before you know it, it's gone. And because they weren't wise, okay? And they were hasty in how they got it, or they inherited it, and they weren't wise enough to know what to do. And there are so many people, as you watch our culture, that have multi-million-dollar contracts in sports or celebrities or all kinds of things, and when they're done playing and now they're broke, and you're like, how can you be broke? You had so much money. It's because they were foolish, right? They invested in things they didn't understand, and they gave their money away, and they lived high on the hog, so to speak, for a while, and now They got money hastily, but it dwindled, okay? So don't rely on get rich quick. Invest into this right now. You got to do it right now. Chapter 21, verse 5 says, "The plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty." What do you see the diligent person doing here? He's planning. This is what a budget is. If you don't have a budget, you need a budget to know where your money comes and where it goes, okay? And so having a budget, living on a budget, knowing with the limits of the budget, being able to say no to yourself and discipline is how the diligent handle money. And the plans of the diligent, they lead surely to abundance. But everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty. We're seeing this theme over and over again. We have to avoid. Wise wealth is not hasty wealth. Get rich quick. Over to chapter 28 and verses 20 and 22. Chapter 28, verses 20 and 22. "A faithful man will abound with blessings, but whoever hastens to be rich will not go unpunished." And then 22, "A stingy man hastens after wealth and does not know that poverty will come after him." So he's going after wealth, not realizing that poverty is going to catch up to him and grab him. So a faithful man will abound with blessings, faithful financially. But it doesn't say financial here. It's actually, there's many other blessings that God gives us besides just finances. But he's in the context here, verse 20, it is talking about finances, because whoever hastens to be rich will not go unpunished. There are many people that get caught for fraud, and they're doing jail time because they have tried to get rich quick, and they have tried to go around the law and try to figure out how to go under the table and not pay the taxes and not do things the right way. And we shouldn't be like that if we're going to be wise. Just gain your wealth by little over time, not all at once. All right, so wisdom avoids money mistakes. Also, if we look at money in Proverbs, there is this money talks. I looked up Google what money talks means. It just, money has influence. Okay, would you rather, even in, everybody's watching, or a lot of people are watching the World Cup right now. Would you rather watch a soccer player or have a soccer player come and speak and have a outreach event where you had a soccer player? A soccer player that makes $1 million or a soccer player that makes $25 million a year? Which would you rather be friends with? You're like, yeah, the Messis make $25 million a year, and the no-name guys who play on soccer teams, because there's a lot of no-name guys in every team, they make so little money, right? The LeBron James versus someone who sits the bench and you never know. Which would you rather be friends with? Oh yeah, the guy that's got a lot of money, right? So now in your family, you get an invitation from a really wealthy relative and a really poor relative. Graduation party, wedding, whatever, okay? Which are you more inclined to go to? How do we think? Where's the food going to be better? Over here. Why? Because they have more money. Or it's going to have a nicer environment, well-dressed people, all this. It's always going to be with the money, right? And so money influences. If you have $1 billion in the bank, people are going to want to interview you whenever the stock market goes down. They're going to want to treat you as an expert whenever they want to start a business and all kinds of things, because money influences. This is just how it has always been like that. Okay, and so Solomon knows that, and he writes that money does attract people. It's a protection, and people want this association. We're going to go quickly through these verses, Proverbs 10:15. So back to 10 and verse 15. "A rich man's wealth is his strong city. The poverty of the poor is their ruin." This is just general observations of humanity. When someone has a lot of money, what happens as stock market crashes? Well, they can still survive or they have a very diversified portfolio. So what happened in 2008, or when COVID hit, you remember the stock market went down a lot in 2020. Those who had a lot of means, they didn't panic often, And you're like, you know what? It'll come back up. This is just a normal dips, and there's a protection that people have when you have a lot of money. Over to chapter 13, verse 8. 13:8 says, "The ransom of a man's life is his wealth, but a poor man hears no threat." What is that saying? There's another proverb that says, 100 men cannot rob one pauper. If someone has no money on them and nothing to steal, and somebody jumps them, and like, "Give me all your money," and they're like, "I don't have any." Like, "No, you really don't." They shake them down. Like, "They still don't have any money." You're like, "Oh, that was pointless." But then you watch someone who has a lot of money, and all the thieves are like, "How are we going to get that guy or that lady?" Because they obviously have money. Look at their watch. Look at their purse. Look at their car. And okay, whenever you rob them, you're like, okay, we got something here. And so whenever you're wealthy, there is some protection here, but a poor man is not threatened by, "Okay, you're going to sue me? What are you going to sue me for? I don't even have a house. Like, you're not going to take anything," right? So they don't usually hear a threat. And then 18:23 of Proverbs. "The poor uses entreaties, but the rich answer roughly." Beggars are often the most persuasive talkers in any culture, while the rich often are tired of being asked for money. So imagine beggars asking a wealthy person for money, and eventually the wealthy, even if he's nice, she's nice, the wealthy person gets frustrated and just says, "I'm not going to give you any money. Stop asking." Okay, and that would be answering roughly. But someone who is really good, we say con man, at getting other people to give them money, has a look, has a persuasiveness about them, and you have to be if you're going to be a beggar for a living. And so that often is, but wealth, another general observation, is that if you're wealthy, you're protected by your money, so you can answer roughly. But if you're poor, you have to be persuasive or you're going to stay begging. Now, let's look at money usually brings desired associations. Like I said earlier, would you rather be invited to a party of someone who's very wealthy, has a really nice estate, or in the projects? Wealth brings a desired association. Would you rather have a relative, a brother or sister, who is known for sitting and begging on the street, and everybody in town knows them, or would you rather have a brother that is known for, he's in city council, he's a high-powered lawyer, doctor, somebody up there, and he's got a lot of wealth, a lot of influence, everybody wants his opinion, everybody wants him on the board of something? Yeah, you'd rather have a brother who is known for success in money instead of what we would call a loser with money, someone who's always in debt, someone who is can't hold a job. So this is a general observation for humanity. Okay, this isn't right or wrong, and we're going to talk about how we as Christians need to look at those who are poor in our final slide. Money usually brings desired associations. In chapter 14, verse 20, it says, "The poor is disliked even by his neighbor, but the rich has many friends." You find out your new neighbor has a lot of wealth, you're going to want to try to befriend them, have them over, get to know their family. You find out your neighbor is in all kinds of debt and just really awful with money and really poor. You're like, you know what, your family can help you. Like, I'm not going to spend my time befriending you. This is generally how any culture treats the wealthy and the poor. The poor are looked at as a culture, as a burden, and the rich are loved. Chapter 19, verses 4 to 6. This is not right or wrong. This is just observations that Solomon is making that we can see throughout history, human history. Any culture, any town has this, because this is human nature. "Wealth brings many new friends," 19:4, "but a poor man is deserted by his friend." Verse 6, "Many seek the favor of a generous man, and everyone is a friend to a man who gives gifts." Not necessarily wealth here, but someone who is generous with his wealth many are seeking his favor. Anyone who's known for giving, when people are looking to raise funds for any kind of thing, they're going to reach that person first. Hey, this is the top of our list, so we're going to hope he will be a good philanthropist. Verse 7, all a poor man's brothers hate him. They don't want to be associated with him. How much more do his friends go far from him? And interesting proverb here, verse 7 has 3 statements. He pursues them with words but does not have them. Okay, remember he's persuasive if he's poor, but they don't want the association. It doesn't help them in any way to be associated with the poor. Okay, this is general observations. Now, how do we, with God's wisdom, if we are wise with our money and you have means, okay, we all have limits. We all have to stick to a plan, a budget. But as God blesses you, you're going to have margin where you're not going to have to live paycheck to paycheck anymore. You're going to have money in the bank for 3 to 6 months if you're wise. And then what do you do with your extra money as you get later on in life and God has blessed you? Or you get an inheritance as some relative who is wise with money passes away and leaves you money because they see you are wise with money. You're going to be gracious. What do you do with your extra money? Okay, and that's where we're going to end here today with Proverbs, because Proverbs says a lot about graciousness. Now we read in 11, go back to chapter 11 and verse 16. There were several verses here. So chapter 11, verse 16. I give you here a verse that doesn't fit in this category because it's the opposite. It's the only one that's opposite, so I show you this as to what, this is not graciousness, all right? Now, as you can be sucked in and I can be sucked into despising people that are poor, the people that are below you financially, and assuming that they probably wasted their money like the prodigal son. But you don't know that unless you get to know them, and maybe when you get to know them, you say, you know what, this was your own doing, or maybe it wasn't, okay? That their mom or dad was just awful with money, deserted them, stole from them, and left them with nothing, and didn't teach them how to work, and didn't teach them how to save, and didn't teach them how to be persuasive or kind or anything. And so they were undisciplined, and that's how they ended up being poor. Well, it says here, a poor man who oppresses the poor. This is like Jesus' story in Matthew 18 about forgiveness, where you're a slave and you have your other slave who owes you a little bit of money, and having been forgiven a lot, there's no way you should treat them with unforgiveness and harshness, like Jesus said in Matthew 18. Here it says that a poor man who oppresses the poor is like a beating rain that leaves no food. If you read through Exodus and the plagues, and the more the plagues were poured out on Egypt, they left that place of Egypt that once was prosperous with very little sustenance, very little food. And so that's what a poor man who oppresses the poor. And so we're not looking to be like our culture, where it's natural for us to look down on poor people and want to be friends with wealthy people. We can't think that way, okay? And Proverbs is going to give us wisdom to think graciously about when we have people around us that have financial need. All right, so verse 16 of Proverbs 11 says this: a gracious woman gets honor, and violent men get riches. So graciousness receives honor from men. You watch some lady who is very gracious. The whole culture, think of the New Testament Lydia, who was a seller of purple. No, not Lydia, Dorcas, who was passed away and Peter raised her from the dead. She was known for being a gracious woman, kind. And whenever she passed away, they went and said, we need this lady in our culture. Peter, can you come do something? And he raised her from the dead. The only time Peter raises someone from the dead was this gracious woman. She received honor from her culture. And violent men get riches. Which would you rather be? Gracious or violent? Oh, right, that's easy, right? Which would you rather have, honor or riches? Oh, yeah, that's harder, right? Like, I don't know. Like, some days I really want riches. Some days you want riches. Forget this honor stuff. Like, the honor doesn't pay the bills, right? When you think practically. But honor is what we need. We're thinking about something bigger than money in the bank. Okay? We're thinking about how does my actions reflect the character of God? Do violent men show people what God is like? Is God violent? No. Cruel? No. Oppressing the poor? No. He's helpful, he's gracious, he's kind, he's generous. Okay? And so graciousness receives honor, and not just from God, which we'll see in the second point, but it receives honor from men. Our culture, we are designed to, when we watch someone who is gracious, we hold them up and say, that son or daughter is what you need to be like. When God blesses you with finances, you aren't stingy. You're not relying on debt. You're living within your means and with some margin so that you're not spending everything that you make on you. You're living so that you can have extra to find people that you can help. And that's the wise. Also, verses 24 and 26, which is why we did this as a scripture reading, because 4 verses are in this passage. Verses 24 to 26 of chapter 11. One gives freely, yet grows all the richer. You watch someone who is very generous, and they're just giving money away, and yet they're growing all the richer, as if God is controlling their finances. Another withholds what he should give, and only suffers want. We all know people, or we've heard of employers that don't pay what they promise to pay their employees. And their employees are saying, but I worked for this. I did overtime, and you're not paying me. And you promised me this. This is why I worked really hard. This is why I worked extra. And you watch that employer, and he's not getting wealth. He's the second part of verse 24, right? He's withholding what he should give, and he's suffering want. His greediness is growing, and his generosity is shrinking. Verse 25, whoever brings blessing will be enriched, and one who waters will himself be watered. Also another way of just saying that God is looking to bless those who are blessing others. And verse 26, the people curse him who holds back grain. So how does a culture, if you're in a culture that relies on wheat, and when the wheat harvest comes, the guy that has the biggest wheat fields is going to say, I am not selling my wheat this year. That causes the rest of the wheat to be more expensive because of supply and demand. And it causes other people to maybe have a need where they were relying on this huge farm to provide wheat. And now the stingy landowner says, I'm not selling to you guys. I'm going to sell outside of this area or whatever. I can get a better price, or I'm just going to keep it for myself or whatever. And it's deceitful. And a culture can't, an economy can't run this way. And what happens whenever all the people in the town are cursing this guy because he's not selling whenever they were expecting him to sell? Okay? Think back with COVID. And what was the one commodity that everyone was wanting to buy? A lot of. We all know it. Toilet paper. And there was the lack of toilet paper in many, many stores. And if you were ahead of the curve, you had stashes of toilet paper. And I talked with a few people, and they're like, do you actually need some? Because I went and I got a bunch. Like, oh, okay. Well, no, I actually didn't stock up on it like you did, but if I get desperate, I'll come to your house. And they were kind enough. These people don't know the Lord, okay? Friends of mine. But that's how this was, okay? And when it comes to a commodity that everyone needs, whenever you've got a lot of it and you won't share, the people that need it are going to start cursing you, okay? But graciousness receives honor. Verse 26 ends with, but a blessing is on the head of him who sells it. So the wealthy man with the big field, instead of hoarding his resources, he says, guys, I have extra grain this year, and because of that, the price has dropped instead of increased, and now everyone in the town is saying, we are so glad that you're part of our town. We're so glad that you are gracious. Okay? Graciousness receives honor from men. Chapter 14, verse 21. Over a page, 14:21. Whoever despises his neighbor. Now, how do we naturally look at neighbors? If they're wealthy, we love them. If they're poor, we don't like them. That's how the natural man thinks, right? Because we saw that in Proverbs. But how does a Christian think about his neighbor? Well, if you despise your neighbor, you're a sinner. You're offending God and them. But blessed is he who is generous to the poor. If you despise the poor, you're not going to be generous to them. And generosity starts in the heart, which everything starts in the heart. And graciousness receives honor from men. We're not sure if this sin is against God or against people, but either way, it is a sin against both, right? And so that's why it's probably general. So we need to learn, whenever we have poor people around us, don't shun them and despise them just because they're poor. We need to move toward them, just like we would any other neighbor, regardless of their financial status or their choices. We're, as Christians, are moving toward people and trying to find out if there's needs that we can help with. And we're living within our means so that we have extra, so as God blesses, we can be a blessing to those around us. Graciousness receives honor not just from men, but from God. This is where it really matters, okay? This is what causes your pillow to be really soft at night if you're gracious, or really hard if you're stingy. This is what keeps really wealthy, stingy people up at night. They're always thinking, I got to protect my assets, I got to protect my stuff, I got to protect everything. And if you're generous, you're like, who else can we have help? Because we have more than we need. And it's wonderful to have more than you need. And where did you get more than you needed? It's from God. And the generous realize, the gracious realize, all we're doing is what God has given us, we're just channels to give it to other people. And it's so wonderful when you're wise with money to be in a place where you can be really gracious. And with this idea that, yes, it does receive honor from men, but more importantly, what does God think of our generosity? It is honorable in His sight too. Let's look at that in 14:31. So 14:31 says, whoever oppresses a poor man insults his maker. Clearly God in view, and maker is capitalized. But he who is generous to the needy honors him. That could be capitalized him, okay? Honors God. Oppressing those without means or influence insults God, but being generous to them honors him, honors God. How are you going to honor God? Well, it's simple. Be wise with money, and then use the extra that you have because of your wisdom God gave you through His Word, through discipline, to help others. Chapter 21. Let's go over to 21, verse 13. 21:13. Whoever closes his ear to the cry of the poor will himself call out and not be answered. A warning here. God is the one who oversees all of finances on the earth, every transaction God sees. And if when you are not generous to the poor, when you have a need and you're crying out to God, God's going to say, well, you aren't generous to the poor, right? See that there in 21:13. Chapter 22, verse 9. Whoever has a bountiful eye, that means generous. He's looking around, seeing who he can help. Whoever has a bountiful eye will be blessed, for he shares his bread with the poor. Very in tune with the poor around, not to despise them, not to look down, not to avoid them, but to befriend them and to help them. Graciousness receives honor from God. Chapter 28, we'll look at 2 verses there, and then our conclusion. 28, Proverbs 28, verse 8. In Leviticus chapter 25, 37, talks about a warning to people not to gain interest with their fellow Israelites with money or profit with food, okay? We often don't think about profiting with food except whenever there's a lack of something, like a lack of food. You go buy all of it. Let's say everybody loves or you want ramen, okay? And I ate a lot of ramen in high school, and there's a shortage on ramen, so instead of being 25 cents a little block, they're now 50 cents, but you realize it, or maybe like the toilet paper, you realize it's going to be a shortage, so you go buy all of, because ramen's cheap, you can go buy all the ramen in the grocery stores. Like all the market baskets are cleared out of ramen, and now you start putting ramen on Facebook Marketplace and eBay and everywhere you can sell it. You're selling it out of your house, out of your garage, for 50 cents. You're doubling your money, right? You would say that would be that'd be wise, okay? But you're taking advantage of people. But that is kind of a business, right? But in 28:8. The Israelites were not allowed to charge interest whether they loaned money or whether they loaned food to people in Leviticus 25:37. Here in 28:8 it says this, whoever multiplies his wealth by interest and profit gathers it for him who is generous to the poor. What is God doing in verse 8? He's watching people take advantage of people and taking their money whenever they pass away or whatever, and channeling it toward those who are generous to the poor. Isn't that fascinating? Like, we look at people that are taking advantage of poor people and oppressing, they're like, that's wrong. Why doesn't God do something? Well, he is doing something. Okay, because what we see here in 28, nothing escapes the eyes of God. Graciousness receives honor, and those who are gracious end up getting money from places they didn't even expect to get money for, because God knows that whenever he gives them extra money, it's going to magnify their character and his character, and they're going to be gracious with these resources. Chapter 28, verse 27 says this, whoever gives to the poor will not want, but he who hides his eyes will get many a curse. Be accursed by men and accursed by God. We want to be blessed by God, don't we? And it's not that we're gracious in order to get blessed by God. You need to check your heart if that's the only reason why you're gracious is so that God will bless you. And there are many false teachers out there that are saying that kind of thing. That's not what Proverbs is saying. But God is saying that graciousness receives honor from him. And last verse in conclusion, chapter 11, verse 28. Actually, I have it here, so you don't have to look. All right, so the last verse, I think, on money, it doesn't fit a category, except it's a very fitting conclusion. As I started with the idea of money, money is a huge part of our life. Some churches don't talk about it at all. Other churches talk about it all the time, and you feel really uncomfortable. They're always asking for money. They're always asking for money. Some people make you really feel bad. Like they think that you got more than them, so they're always asking, hey, can I loan some? Can I borrow some? And you're like, you're not going to pay it back, are you? Like you're just asking for a loan, not borrowing, or you're asking for a grant. But we can't trust in riches. There are many, 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 many wealthy people that they're trusting in riches. There are many young people that think, if I can just get really good at baseball, basketball, soccer, sport, I will be well off. And you look at how much those jobs pay. You're like, whoa, yeah, those guys make more in one game than we make in a year just for playing a sport, right? But you can trust in your riches. It doesn't matter how much riches you have. It's where your trust is at. Now, what is Proverbs 3, 5, and 6? Introduction to the book. What's it tell us about trust? Trust in the Lord with all your heart. And don't lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. You know how God directs our paths? Into graciousness, into love for the poor, warning possibly the rich, not to trust in the riches because the riches will fall. Because God is over all this. And we know the story of the rich man and Lazarus in the New Testament. Here's a man who likely trusted in his riches. Confronted with the gospel, confronted with godly people, he would probably say, like many people today, I'm all set. I got plenty of money in the bank. Anything I get diagnosed with, I can pay the best doctors in the world. But whoever trusts in riches will fall. God oversees the end of man, and riches will not buy you 1 minute in heaven. You know, if you could pay $1 million to get in heaven, who would be in heaven? Millionaires. How about all of us poor people? We don't have a chance. But it's not a price to get into heaven. How do we get into heaven? By grace, we're saved through faith. It's a gift of God, not of works or a pay, so that no one can boast. Heaven is open to anyone. But what riches, Jesus warned, are a huge stumbling block. It's a huge problem for riches and we're in a very wealthy, you compare your life to many other countries, and you have the internet now to do that, you are very wealthy. You don't realize it. Very few people have one car, let alone 2 or 3. Very few people have their own bedrooms in a house, and they instead of just one room. Very few people have any money for retirement. They have to work until the day they die. Okay? We are a very wealthy country. But if we trust in our riches, we're going to fall. And as Christians, we need to know that. We don't trust in our riches, we trust in the Lord. If He wants us to use them, if He blesses us, we're going to look to see if we can help others. But the righteous will flourish like a green leaf. Jeremiah 17:8 says this. You know Isaiah, Psalm 1 says this, that if we delight in the law of the Lord and meditate, we will be like a tree planted by rivers of water. So let's not trust in our wealth. It is a wise tool. It's a powerful tool. But it's a very foolish idol. And if you find that you or your spouse is starting to worship money, how do you know if you're worshiping money? Everything is about money. Everything. Every argument, every conversation. When you get most angry, you don't have money. When you get most happy, you have the most money. Money is your idol. And we all have to fight against it. We all have to, because we live in a very prosperous, and it's very easy in our country to get enamored, because a lot of people around us have the idolatry of money. And it's a very foolish idol. It's a wise tool. So let's use it to bring people to Christ. Let's pray. Our Father, thank you for the wisdom that you give us through your word. Help us not to trust in our riches. Thank you for the wisdom that you give us and how to avoid debt and not be hasty, but just little by little save and invest and be gracious with the extra that you have given us. Help us to live disciplined lives and content lives so that we can be used to help missionaries and help people that are translating the Bible into languages that they don't even have a Bible yet, and helping fund outreach events and other things. And we're so blessed here in our country to have an abundance of resources. Help us to walk close to you. Help us to work hard. Help us to save, and help us to reflect your character, your generosity, and your graciousness with how we use our money. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.